It's another Wednesday edition of PFT PM, my first COVID-free edition. Now, I tested myself after PFT Live, and after 15 minutes, the sample area on the test was clear. So I assume it was negative. Then I noticed later there was a thin line there. My wife tells me that's not valid. If the line shows up after 15 minutes, it is still a negative. I may test again just to see. I feel fine. You don't realize how good it feels to feel fine until you've been sick and you haven't felt fine. It is very easy to take for granted feeling fine until you don't. And then you know how good it is to feel fine. So I feel fine. Planning to go back to NBC this weekend and hoping that I will test again negative after 15 minutes. Not thin line a half hour or 45 minutes or an hour later. So crisis averted. And the big thing about it too, for those of you that have had it, it's a combination of feeling like crap and worrying that other people in your family might have it and worrying that it's going to take a turn for the worse for you. So it's one thing to just have the flu. When you have the flu, all right, you got the flu. But then you get the flu and you're carrying this bag of, oh my God, did I give it to my wife? Did I give it to my son? Did I give it to my dog? Are my in-laws going to get it because my wife takes care of them and they're elderly and they had gotten it before and it wasn't good for my father-in-law? And just this vague thing, especially because I've got autoimmune comorbidities, as the doctors would say, that may have, in theory, caused it to take a wild turn and go crazy for me. Like every cough, every little ache and pain. Do I have pneumonia? Am I going to end up in the hospital? So that wasn't a feeling I had for a very long time. It never got all that bad, but it does feel great to feel fine. All right. Not a whole lot happening on this Wednesday, but there was news since the end of PFT Live, and that would be the trade that brings J.C. Jackson back to the Patriots from the Chargers in a Cam Akers style trade. J.C. Jackson plus a 7 in 2025 for a 6 in 2025. Now, the Akers trade pushed it all the way up to 2026. Not quite that bad. Not the same fire sale as what the Rams engaged in to get rid of Cam Akers. And reportedly, to no surprise, the Chargers are paying most of J.C. Jackson's remaining salary this year. His compensation for this season was fully guaranteed anyway. If they would have cut him, they'd have been stuck. And the Patriots could have signed him for the league minimum, prorated over the balance of the season, and gotten him for nothing. So he goes back to New England at a time when Christian Gonzalez, first-round pick, reportedly out for the year, fills a need. And as I said on PFT, desperate times call for desperate players. And J.C. Jackson was clearly in the doghouse with the Chargers. He was a healthy scratch in week 3 in their win over the Vikings. He was in the active lineup. I don't know how much he played against the Raiders in week 4, but they were clearly done with him. He goes back to the place where he got his career started, and the Patriots get a warm body at a position where they need one at a time when they need some wins. They need to do something to turn around this early season run of bad luck while Bill Belichick still has a chance to do so. And I firmly believe that Bill Belichick's on the hot seat. Dan Patrick and I were kicking this around earlier today on PFT Live. He appeared for about a 20-minute spot to promote his new book. You can check that out wherever you get your podcasts, or you can see the clip. Because Dan was saying, well, what questions could the reporters ask him that would be appropriate? And there isn't any question he would answer about his job status. He would just say, well, I'm just worried about the next game. I have any control over that. Look, we're all employed as long as they want to employ us. Just something, there's no point. And then he would just be upset. And when you cover a team, the last thing you want to do is have the person ultimately in charge of that team upset with you. So I still think that if they miss the playoffs, he's in serious trouble. If they finish last in their division, he's in serious trouble. I think playoffs is the key, because when Bill Belichick's status was presented to Bob Kraft, league meetings in March, the question of, Does Belichick stay until he passes Don Shula for the all-time wins record? It wasn't, yeah, sure, he's here as long as he wants to be. He's won 6 Super Bowls. Why would you even ask that question? Coach for life. Coach forever. No. I care that our players get stats and whatever, but we're here to win games and make the playoffs. Make the playoffs is the key. So will J.C. Jackson be enough alone to make the playoffs? Probably not. The biggest issue is getting more out of Mac Jones, third-year quarterback, who did not look very good on Sunday. In his defense, not many quarterbacks are going to look very good against the Cowboys defense in 2023. And the Patriots are just physically overmatched against the Cowboys. Cowboys, a far more talented team, a far better team, a far more viable team right now, top to bottom, across the board, than the New England Patriots are. Another development related to J.C. Jackson is the news, broken by PFT, by the way, not that nobody cares. You just want the news. We're here to give you the news. We cast a wide net. Whoever reports it has. If something falls into my lap, I'll share it with you. Randy Gregory, veteran defensive lineman, to be released by the Broncos. The move likely becomes official at 4 p.m. Eastern today. And when I first heard it, I thought, okay, precursor to a J.C. Jackson, Cam Akers type of a trade. Denver eats most of the salary, $14 million this year, fully guaranteed. It's about 10.88 that remains. Denver gets a late round pick, maybe gives back a late round pick in 24, 25, 26. And Randy Gregory goes to a new team. I saw that Mike Kliss of 9 News reported after the news came out that Gregory would be released that the Broncos have already tried to trade him. So that has been exhausted. It is over. Gregory will be released. And because he is not subject to the waivers rule, he's got 4 or more years of service. He immediately becomes a free agent. He can go wherever he wants. He can pick a contender. He can go to a team that may be trying to simulate what the Eagles have going on with the 8 defensive linemen who rotate in and out and constantly harass and barrage the opposing offensive line. That could be what Randy Gregory tries to do. And he can go to any team he wants to go to. Team's got to want him, but any team that wants him, he gets his pick. And he just goes for the prorated veteran minimum because Broncos are on the hook for the remainder up to that prorated salary of $14 million for the year. My understanding is that Broncos are ready to move on. Gregory was ready to move on. And it just shows you that Sean Payton's running the show there because it was George Payton that signed Randy Gregory. Remember that whole thing where he was going to stay with the Cowboys? And the question was, and it shows you how valuable getting that guarantee for the second year is. The question was how the guarantees could potentially void. And the Cowboys had a very low bar to void the guarantees. The Broncos fully guaranteed both years. So Gregory's got that financial protection. He's taken that money with him. And the Broncos have other players that they're ready to rely upon. You typically don't let quality pass rushers go. And I think it's just one of those things where Sean Payton decided Randy Gregory, not his cup of tea, not his tempo, and willing to move on from Gregory because he's a net gain to the team at large by moving on from a guy who ultimately contributed 3 sacks, was injured for a lot of 2022, 3 sacks for the money that he received from George Payton. And between the Russell Wilson trade, the Randy Gregory signing, and just the overall condition of that roster, I know that there's a sense that Sean Payton went there because of George Payton to a certain extent, to work with George Payton to create the kind of relationship that Payton had in New Orleans all those years with Mickey Loomis. But relationships can take a turn. And if the cupboard ends up being as bare as it looks, George Payton is the guy who put a lot of those empty boxes in that empty cupboard. So it'll be interesting to see what happens after the season ends. If Sean Payton decides he needs to bring in someone else to be the one who helps him find the right players to turn the Broncos around. A lot of it depends upon what happens over the balance of the season. This game on Sunday, Jets at Broncos, is critical. And the whole Nathaniel Hackett, Sean Payton storyline, it was fun back when the comments from Sean Payton came to light. But this is a critical game for both teams. I don't want to say that whoever loses it is done, but whoever loses it falls to 1-4. And this is something Miles Simmons and I were talking about today. How many losses can you really afford before you're done? This is only year 3 of the 17-game schedule. It used to be when you got to around 4 or 5, the window was getting pretty narrow. Remember the Patriots in 2008 went 11-5 and didn't make it. There were times where teams went 10-6 and didn't make it. I think the Chiefs were one of the annual proponents of the expanded playoff field, given that argument that all too often good teams are left out. 10-6 teams are left out. Now that we're at 17 games, when do you really get nervous about being left out in an expanded playoff field? 10-7, 9-8. So once you get to 5 losses, you get to 5 losses before Halloween, damn. You don't have many more losses. You got to get hot. You got to get hot. At some point, you got to run the table. And we saw it last year. The Lions got hot, just missed it. Steelers got hot, just missed it. Those wins and losses in September and October, they don't determine your fate. They don't decide what kind of a team you'll be. There it is, the national alert. They told me it was coming. It's a little early. Wouldn't it be funny if this isn't the test, but like the missiles are in the air 2 minutes before the test? Let's see. This is a test of the, oh, now it's gone. Well, all right. Bye-bye test. I hope it's a test. I hope the missiles aren't in the air. And now the test comes 2 minutes from now, 2:18 p.m. Eastern, the test of the emergency broadcast system. So when the missiles are in the air, they can let us all know to assume the position we all learned back in grade school in the 70s during the Cold War. Basically, sit down, bend over, put your head between your legs, kiss your ass goodbye. Get under the desk and kiss your ass goodbye. Getting under the desk is going to make all the difference in the world when the missiles are in the air. And, you know, I don't know. I think the fact that there was a generation of us that grew up under that threat constantly, we have a respect for what it means to have nuclear war that, I don't know, that, like, people just talk about it kind of glibly. Like, it would not be good. It would be the end of civilization as we know it. It would be death and destruction and mayhem. Well, happy Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. All right. It kind of makes the stuff that we talk about here seem pretty damn trivial when you think of it. But hopefully our elected officials, the ones who aren't brain dead, the ones who actually are motivated by goodwill and the best interest of the nation, will find a way to guide us on a path to long-term peace, a peace that we've managed to maintain for really 60 years, more than 60 years since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yeah, everything else does seem pretty trivial after thinking about that. All right, we'll still try to talk about one more topic before we let you hear from Bobby Wagner, Seahawks linebacker, who will be joining me here momentarily, I believe, unless he responded to the emergency broadcast alert by assuming the missiles really are in the air. Brett Favre, the missiles are in the air for him in the civil litigation in Mississippi. I mentioned this at the end of PFT Live today, but I didn't have a chance to really talk about it the way I wanted to. I was just filling the last couple of minutes after we finished the Dan Patrick interview, full disclosure. But let's set the stage here. Brett Favre allegedly pestered, harassed, and I don't mean harassed in a sexually harassed way, just was very persistent in trying to get available funding for a couple of different things, allegedly. University of Southern Mississippi Volleyball Center. He had some sort of a speaking deal, publicity deal, PR deal. They paid him the money. He paid it back. At one point, he was sued for the interest on the money he was paid before he paid it back. But you've got the volleyball thing. You've got money that Prevacus received. It was this company that he was involved in that was doing concussion research and coming up with some sort of magic elixir to cure concussions or something like that. I don't know. That's just the background. The bottom line is Brett Favre is accused by Mississippi authorities of being involved in this effort to grab federal welfare money that had been earmarked for Mississippi. He denies everything. If you haven't heard, I need to say it over and over again, lest I be sued. He denies everything. He denies wrongdoing. He's innocent until proven guilty. He's been accused of no crime. This is a civil lawsuit aimed at just recovering money. And he tried his damnedest to get dismissed from the civil lawsuit. Took it all the way to the Mississippi Supreme Court. Every step of the way, the decision was, no, you're in this thing. Now, if you're in it, at some point, you have to show up at a lawyer's office, go to a conference room, court reporter's in there with that little machine where they press the buttons and the stuff comes out and nobody knows what the hell it is except the court reporter. And Brett Favre will put his hand in the air and he will be asked, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And I heard it so many times, I can recite it in my sleep. And he'll say, I do. And then even though the person sitting across from him will know full well who Brett Lorenzo Favre is, that lawyer will say, state your name. He will, and then it goes from there. And that's when it gets interesting, because Favre's lawyers have said he's not going to invoke the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. And that's fine, but if he answers questions and the lawyer keeps coming at him and he keeps answering questions and the lawyer boxes him in, I don't know, at some point he may want to flip that card. That may be his break glass in event of emergency option. But once you do that, you've lost the civil case. Because all they have to do is play that exchange to the jury, and it gives the plaintiff everything they need to convince the jury that what the plaintiff is saying is true. In a criminal case, it's inadmissible. In a civil case, it's fully admissible. So, if he testifies, he's going to have to answer questions about text messages we've seen, about other evidence that's come to light, allegations, just allegations, but he's going to be pressed on those. And I've taken and defended many depositions in the 19 years I practiced law, and that's what they call it. If you're the lawyer whose client is being questioned, you're defending the deposition. And your goal is not that you can really intervene, but you try to use objections in a way that gets a message through to your client to supplement the coaching that you engaged in before the thing started. Because beforehand, Brett Favre's lawyers will spend, I would assume, I would hope, a full day talking to him about this process and going through some sample questions and giving him an idea of what it's going to be like and trying to get him to understand the most fundamental thing. And I've had clients who understood this, and I've had clients who didn't. And I've had people I've questioned who didn't understand this. It's not a fight. It's not a competition. It's not swordplay where you're going in there and you're going to take on this lawyer. No. You are there to answer the questions you are asked, truthfully and completely, but only completely. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and nothing more. Don't say anything more than what you're asked. Say exactly what is necessary to answer the question truthfully and not a word more. And the hard part is there will always be something that the lawyer can take and characterize in a way that makes his or her case stronger. And there will be questions asked with an accusatory tone, and it will be set up in a way that may be a little misleading. And the witness will sense, oh boy, I got to say yes to this, but if I say yes, it's going to make my case weaker. And then the next question is going to be that, and I'm going to have to say yes to that. I better put a stop to this. That's when the thing goes off the rails for the person who's testifying, because once you decide to start arm wrestling with the lawyer, the next thing you know, you've committed perjury without realizing it. That's the danger for Brett Favre. To have that testosterone flow like it did on game day, to the point where he just says whatever he has to say to feel like he has won this session. At all times, he must be guided by the fundamental reality that if he fails to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, he has violated the law. And even if he never was going to be prosecuted for anything related to the allegations arising from welfare funds, he could be prosecuted for perjury. That's the danger. That's why the best move would be to just settle this. I hope he understands the risks he's taking. I mean, this is Carl Wallenda stuff. Do you remember Carl Wallenda? Tightrope walker, eventually not. There were a bunch of Wallendas that died in the 70s. But you're out there on that rope on your own with a big pole, and you better balance that pole just right. If the wrong gust of wind comes at the wrong time and you don't deal with it the right way, you are down and it is over. And it won't feel that way at the time. See, at the moment that you say that thing that is eventually going to get you prosecuted for perjury, no one swoops in. There's no alarm that goes off like the missiles are in the air. There's nothing like that. The deposition just keeps going. But the people who understand how it works, they know. They know that the witness has stepped in something brown and smelly, and the process of scraping it off could involve a period of time banging out license plates in the custody of the Mississippi correctional system. All right, let's answer a few questions because I've timed this out. So as soon as I'm done with this, I'll talk to Bobby Wagner. But I'm going to lay out at this point for the Bobby Wagner interview, which will be inserted here before I answer the question. So, sort of, here's my interview with Bobby Wagner, Seahawks legend and future Hall of Famer. We'll answer questions on the other side. Joining us now, one of the all-time greats at the linebacker position, hell, one of the all-time greats at any defensive position. He's back in Seattle after a brief hiatus, and the Seahawks, if you haven't noticed, are pretty damn good. So is linebacker Bobby Wagner. Hey, Bobby, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm still trying to figure out what happened on Monday night. You were in the middle of it. What was that?
It was just a really good defense, coming together, a group of guys making a lot of plays, and honestly, it was just fun.
Did you have any idea that's what was going to happen?
I did not. I watched the San Francisco film, and, I know San Francisco went up by a lot, but, you watch those guys come back. We got a ton of respect for Daniel Jones and, his ability to run. And so, we wasn't sure how it was going to play out, but, we thought we had a chance to win.
What's that feeling when you're out there and your plan works and you're just swarming the blockers and getting to the quarterback over and over again?
I think it's just simply put, it's just fun. You know that everything's kind of clicking, and then it's a lot more fun when everybody is doing it. You had Spoon had a really, really big game, but you had a lot of other guys that were able to get sacks, hits on the quarterback, really limit their rushing, except for him getting out and using his legs, and so it was just fun.
You mentioned Spoon. That's Devin Witherspoon, 5th overall pick in the draft. That kid is just incredible. Not a big guy, but boy, he has an impact. What have been your impressions of him so far?
He's been such a tremendous player for us. He's so smart, a very physical quarter, loves to hit, loves to come up and tackle on the run fits, also can make plays in the passing game. And I really just feel like he's starting to understand like how good he can be in this league, and how easy it is when you study and put the work in.
It really is amazing to see the fearlessness and the smarts. And I think the move to nickel is a major change because it puts him in a position where he can do so many different things. I hate to compare him to Rondé Barber, who just made it to the Hall of Fame, and Devin Witherspoon's got a long way to go, but he's in a position where he can have the kind of impact on a game that Rondé Barber did on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, he had a couple sacks, he had a big hit on a tackle, he had a pick, obviously, for 6, and the sky's the limit for him.
The Seahawks this year were expected to be good. Last year was the year that it was kind of like, who knows what they're going to be without Russell Wilson and without you. This year, there was an expectation the Seahawks would be good. There was that little road bump week 1, but boy, since then, it's been something. Now, I spoke to Tyler Lockett after you guys beat the Lions, and he said that you had a lot to do with turning the page on week 1, that your leadership played a big role in getting the attention of the players to forget about what happened against the Rams and just keep going. What do you remember saying to the players to get them to forget about what happened in week one and focus on the rest of the schedule?
I think it was a lot of that. A lot of, you come into a season where last year they didn't really have any expectation, and this year there's so much expectation. So, you hear, maybe, you got a lot of young guys reading the media or this, that, and the third, and they come into the season, and that first game doesn't go the way you want it to go. And in this league, when you hold your hat on a game, whether it's a win or a loss, it affects the next game. And that was kind of the biggest message. Like, okay, that game didn't go the way we wanted. We got to move past it. We got to, lock in on this next game, or we can lose this game because of our emotions from the last game. And that was kind of the biggest thing.
Yeah, don't let one loss become two. That's one thing I've learned from Chris Sims
Exactly.
over the year from his time in the league, that if you get two down in the dumps about one, next train's coming, and then the next
Yep.
train's coming, and you got to forget about the train that ran over you, and you got to go run over somebody else.
Right. And then the same thing with a win. Like, you can get so high from a win and be patting your back so much to the point where you come in and you lose a game you're not supposed to lose.
This is an early time for the bye, but it seems like a good time given the Jamal Adams concussion, Geno Smith kind of banged up. Would you rather have a bye later, or are you happy that it's worked out the way that it has, that you guys get a break now?
I was telling the guys this the other day, I feel like in the course of my career, the bye always happens when it's supposed to. Like, if it's early, you might have some injuries that allowed you to, get your guys healthy. And then there's sometimes when, you know, uh, later on it helpful. So honestly, it just kind of depends on how the season going. This particular season, I think is good for us because we can get a lot of guys back healthy and we have enough games for them to get used to, playing and stuff like that.
Geno got injured along the sideline with a hip drop tackle. Coach Pete Carroll spoke out against that technique after the game. As a defensive player, what's your thought on that technique of basically grabbing the guy and using the body weight to fall down and possibly getting his legs caught up in the aftermath?
I didn't see the play, so I can't really fully comment on it. But I will say that it's very hard to be a defender in this league. It's very hard to tackle a person in this league. And if anything, I think the hit that happened, it was really late on the sideline and didn't necessarily need to happen. But at the end of the day, it's very hard to tackle in this league, and every year they make it harder and harder. So, um, I think I'm always on the defensive side.
Now, you've been in the NFL for a while, but even though you came in 2012, it was after the changes from the CBA in 2011, and that limited dramatically the amount of time that players have to practice in pads and the offseason programs. How do you know how to tackle properly during a game when you don't practice tackling to the ground as much as guys used to? Not that you were in the NFL before the change came, but help us understand what that's like to be out there in a game, being expected to go out there and tackle guys when you aren't really practicing the exact thing you're about to do on a regular basis.
Honestly, for me personally, I think the game is 90% mental, and a lot of it is visual. And so I can visualize thousands and thousands of tackles if I'm paying attention in practice. And I think that is the biggest thing to me. Like, sometimes I don't really feel like you need to go all the way to the ground. Like, once you do it and becomes repetition, a lot of it is just keeping that visual keys and things of that nature. So me coming into the league and playing with the Seahawks, we've never tackled at practice. We've never went full speed in training camp. All of our live tackle opportunities has came either in preseason or in the beginning of the season. And so I feel like we were one of the best tackling teams in the league. And so I think the proof is in the pudding.
What's it like being back with the Seahawks after being away?
It's great. I think it's definitely a new appreciation. Definitely grateful because I saw even like that last game when I was able to come back, how connected the community and how much love you have for the city of Seattle, and it's really cool to put on his jersey again and play in front of these fans.
I was there the night in MetLife Stadium when you guys beat the Broncos in Super Bowl 48. When you're back there, do you feel that? Does that account for? I know the rest of the team wasn't there, but for you personally, did you have a little extra lift being back in the place where you won a Super Bowl?
I don't think so because like you said, there's not many people, if any from that from that era. So there's nobody to talk about it with. There's nobody to talk about that feeling with. So, it's kind of just you kind of just put it behind you. And, if there was people around that I've, experienced that moment with, and we talk about it, but everybody's kind of new and young.
Before we wrap this up, I need to mention that Bobby's here today on behalf of the USAA Partnership for the Prevent Defense Campaign. Tell us more about that.
Kind of like what we were talking about just a second ago, just how much love I have for this city and how much love I have for this community. Part of loving the community is being able to protect it. And, I know it rains a lot here, but wildfires is something that happens more often than people think. And, being able to partner up with USAA and the Written Fire Department to help people understand that, it's our job to protect the thing that we love is just a really cool initiative and really cool to be a part of.
Yeah, all those wildfires start somehow, and a lot of times it happens because somebody did something small, some little thing that could have been avoided. And it's important for people to be aware, especially when they're camping, of every little thing, the fires you leave behind, anything that could possibly get a fire started. So great by you to spread the awareness of that. We support that absolutely and completely. This team, in comparison to the Super Bowl 48 championship team, since you're the one common piece, other than the coaching staff, or not many members of the coaching staff, but Coach Pete Carroll, do you see similarities back to the team?
I don't compare. I don't try to compare. I try to treat every season like a new season. So I know a lot of people try to, but I'm not really one of them because you can't make another Sherm, you can't make another Cam, you can't make another Earl. A lot of those guys cannot be replicated, and I have too much respect for those guys to even try to.
Well, don't need to make another Bobby Wagner because he's still on the team.
Yeah,
So that's good news for the Seahawks.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, pal. Well, congratulations on the great start to the season. All the best moving forward, and great work with USAA on preventing wildfires. We hope to talk to you again down the road.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, that was Bobby Wagner, Seahawks linebacker. And as it turned out, just as I was getting ready to throw to the phony break, Bobby Wagner showed up in the Zoom. We did the interview, so there was no phony break. Literally, I just finished the interview, and now we'll finish up PFT PM with some of your questions. PFT PM posse. Is there any actual benefit to the Cowboys' game plan because Trey Lance is here now? Doesn't seem like there would be, since Kyle Shanahan could coach circles around Mike McCarthy in his sleep, and things change so much. Miles Simmons and I talked about this today on PFT Live. The question is, I see that 2 minutes early is trending on Twitter now too, because they got us with the emergency alert. 2 minutes early, see when you least expect it. The challenge is not to understand what the 49ers do. It's what are they going to do? What are they going to do against this team this day? How are they going to attack this version of this defense? And that's where Trey Lance can be helpful. Not what have they done in the past, but as Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator, try to get in position so they understand how Kyle Shanahan will attack, maybe you tap into Trey Lance to get some information that will help you make a good guess as to what is coming. Not what's happened, but what is coming. There will be a unique game plan specifically designed for this game, this day, with 4 games of tape from this year that can be used to come up with that game plan where, as Sims knows, and as Sims taught me, Kyle Shanahan starts with the run first and then passes off of that. But these two teams are physically equal, and we'll see what they do on Sunday night. Another one from PFT PM posse. Can teams work in terms when trading draft picks so a team doesn't potentially have their hands tied if someone like Aaron Rodgers goes down and it's clear and obvious he won't play 70% of the snaps? If so, would teams do it? This gets into the whole idea that the Jets have a conditional pick for next year. First rounder, if Aaron Rodgers plays, I think the number 65% of the snaps. Second rounder, if he doesn't. We know he's not going to, although he is determined to come back at some point during the regular season. But we know, as a practical matter, he's not going to. But what happens is those 2 picks are essentially an escrow. The Jets can't do anything with those 2 picks. They're both caught up in the terms of the trade. Now, I think in theory, the Jets could trade the second-round pick because then the Packers would get the first-round pick and they'd gladly take it. But my understanding is if the Packers wanted to have access to that first-round pick now for trade purposes, which they don't because they're not going out to get a starting quarterback. But if they did, I think they'd have to go back to the Packers and rework the terms where they could essentially agree, okay, we know Aaron Rodgers has a ruptured Achilles. We'll send you the medical information so you can see. And yeah, he wants to come back, but he's not going to participate in 65% of the snaps. Can we just have our first round pick? And the response I have to that is, why would the Packers do it? What's in it for them? Teams are not in the habit of doing favors for other teams. Teams in need. Give us a 7th round pick, 6th round pick, give us something. And we'll do it, but we're not doing it for nothing. You wouldn't do it for nothing. Why should we do it for nothing? And it's not the kind of gratuity that would get extended like a professional courtesy that comes up from time to time. This never comes up. When does it ever come up? So it's not like you scratch our back now, we'll scratch your back later. It's not one of those things. So I think they would have to, if the Jets wanted to have the freedom of that first round pick, so they could trade it to someone else between now and the closing of the trade window, which comes 4 weeks from today, they'd have to rework their deal with the Packers. And again, I don't think they're going to. One more from PFT PM Posse. Whatever happened to Taco Bill, who had so many amazing drawings, illustrations, etc. from the early days of PFT? Tell us the whole Taco Bill story, and is there any way we can get the old Taco Bill archived artwork? Taco Bill was a guy who just reached out to me out of the blue and started sending in these photoshopped images that were funny, and we would use them. And I can't even remember when it started. Once we went to NBC and fell under an official Getty Images license, and I think we had an AP license at the time, we were told basically they were getting ready to shut that practice down anyway of taking their photos and putting a twist on it, putting a spin on it, putting something on it to make it funny. So once we joined NBC, the Taco Bill images ended, and I haven't heard from him in a long time. And we ultimately were paying him. Once we started making money, we started paying him a fee for every one that we decided to use. The arrangement was, you can send in as many as you want. If I use it, we'll pay you X dollars. It wasn't much per photo, but that's what we eventually did. At first, he just did it for free because he liked the site and he thought it was fun and it was, a nice little hobby for him. But once we started making Sprint money, that's when we started paying him. But then by the time we went to NBC, that was the end of the Taco Bill experience with PFT. Dr. J144, Matt Canada's burner account may or may not have been real, but my question is, have you ever been tempted to make a burner account? You can be a bit of a lightning rod at times because you're willing to speak on topics that others aren't, which we as fans appreciate. Well, I appreciate that you appreciate it. Look, first of all, I don't care what people say, what people think, because the passion that gets people to take shots at me is the passion that brings them here in the first place. That was a conversation I had with my wife when we first had comments. She would read them and say, do you see what they're saying? And I said, don't read it. And second of all, it's the passion that brings them here that manifests itself in those kinds of comments. True fans get mad at anyone who isn't showing their team proper respect. I used to be that way. If I was 23 years old in this era, I would be as big of an ass as the biggest ass is toward me, because I would think, you hate my team, you're wrong, here's why, and you get paid more than enough money to take it. And that's my attitude. I mean, even the worst day in this job is better than the best day in the job I used to have. Well, I don't know. Some of the days when the jury comes in with a nice verdict, those are pretty good days. Other than those days, look, I'm never stressed out. I'm never it gets busy and hectic, but I never have anyone else's interests in my hands. I still think about cases I handled 15, 20 years ago where, boy, if I just would have done this differently, if I would have done that differently, would we have gotten a better outcome? I didn't like carrying that around. With this, I do my job to the best of my abilities. I try to be right about anything and everything we report. And I'm far more careful now than I used to be because of the NBC relationship. And I'm not bashful about sharing my opinions, and I know that if it's going to piss some people off, so be it. And if they want to say bad things about me, so be it. and we don't have comments anymore, but they can say it on Twitter, they can say it wherever. And there really is a strange difference between Twitter and like YouTube. When we put these videos on YouTube, the comments are so positive. It makes me think, does NBC have a farm of burners that I don't know about? Like, this is not how it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be a bunch of people saying, hey, you're great job. You're the man. Great video. Thanks for this. Thanks for that. I like this. I like that. It's supposed to be, you're a dumbass or worse. So I don't feel compelled to do it. And I also believe that it's the kind of thing that if you do it, you're eventually going to get caught. You're eventually going to get found out. You're eventually going to screw up. You're eventually going to make a mistake. You're going to post that. Remember when Skip Bayless did that? He posted something that would have been from his burner on his main Twitter account, and it was clear he had a burner because it was the kind of thing you'd put on a burner. And remember when the report came out that Roger Goodell's wife had a burner that she was using to defend him? And I've told my wife, don't ever do that. And I can understand if your spouse wants to support you that way, but I've never had one. I never will have one because number one, I don't care. And number two, I don't trust myself to do it in a way that will keep it concealed, because I believe, and this may be 12 years of Catholic school and the guilt that comes from it, keeping me from doing it. I believe you always will get caught, especially if you're trying to pull off a burner account. Another one from Dr. J. When do we start asking if Brian Daboll is a repeat of Ben McAdoo? Both made the playoffs first season in New York, then things went south quickly in year two. McAdoo didn't get the benefit of the doubt year two like Daboll has so far. Well, Daboll has a quarterback. There's no quarterback that could have functioned behind that offensive line on Monday night. There's none. This is just like what's going on with the Jets. Zach Wilson is the problem. That's what they were saying before. Zach Wilson flipped the switch on Sunday night against the Chiefs. Now, who knows? Maybe Zach Wilson is the answer. But everyone's dumping on Daniel Jones. Ed Donatel was trending on Monday because the Giants fans are blaming the former Vikings defensive coordinator for having such a bad defense that it forced the Giants to pay Daniel Jones $40 million a year. Look, no quarterback can do anything without time. There's that one clip out there of a four-man rush devouring the Giants' offensive line and getting Daniel Jones before he could do anything. So the offensive line's a problem. Andrew Thomas was injured. Evan Neal has been banged up and not as good as maybe they thought he was going to be. They've had other injuries. They lost two blockers on Monday night when they tried to do the quarterback push play. Offensive line. You've got to have a competent offensive line or you can't do anything as an offense. That's the challenge. And the problem is once you're into a season, 4 weeks, what can you do to really make your offensive line better? What can you do? It's not like you can go find a great offensive lineman. And any team that has one is not going to trade them. And any great offensive lineman out there with options is probably not going to want to come play for you because it's going to take more than one great offensive lineman to turn this thing around. But we'll see. The vibe with the Giants to me is like last year didn't even happen. Like it's already as bad as it was pre-2022. And if anything, last year has made it harder for them because now they're stuck with Daniel Jones through 2024. And I keep thinking of the Saquon Barkley situation. We had reported back in July before Barkley and the Giants didn't work out a long-term contract. The Giants had gone to him first because they had Barkley and Jones headed for free agency. Remember, they didn't pick up the fifth-year option on Jones. So both guys were heading to free agency at the same time. They wanted to sign Barkley to a long-term deal and franchise tag Jones just so they could be sure. When Barkley rejected their offer, that's when they pivoted to Jones, and now they're stuck with Jones through 2024, no matter what happens this year. Now, they don't have to play him, but they're paying him, and he gets a lot of money next year. And then after 2024, they could tear up the contract and move on. Tom Marshall, fresh from the first UK game of the year, A-Red Zone of UK. Is it too early to say the Panthers picked the wrong quarterback? Yes, it's too early to say it, but it's not too early to wonder. When you look at what C.J. Stroud has done through 4 weeks, I think if the Panthers knew that CJ Stroud was going to do what he did, they would have taken him over Bryce Young. Because the issue with Bryce Young was size and durability. And what have we already seen? He's missed a game because of an ankle injury. And it just feels like something's missing. He may grow into the job. He may end up being great. But this is the danger of having your owner involved. And they can say whatever they want. It really does feel like the owner was involved in the process. And the owner's the one who fell in love with Bryce Young. And they got so caught up in that S2 test, that processing test. See, that's where biases manifest themselves. If there's somebody you just like, and there's a bunch of different factors you could point to differentiate the guy you like from the guy that you really don't have an opinion about, and you want to go with the guy you really like, you're going to err on the side of overly emphasizing the thing that justifies your bias. Well, he really nailed the S2 test, and CJ Stroud didn't. Well, we got to go with Bryce Young, the guy that I really like. Not only a handful of teams rely on the S2 test. If it was such a great indicator of who's going to be a great player, everybody would use it. So they might have picked the wrong quarterback. If I was in Carolina right now, I'd be very concerned. I'd also be very glad that it wasn't a team in my division that I have to see twice per year. It could be that the Panthers blew it both as to Stroud and Anthony Richardson, that of the three that were available top of the draft, they picked the one guy who maybe doesn't work out. But it's still early. The other side of the coin is you don't get many cracks at it before people come to the conclusion that you are a bust. Another one from Dr. J144. Why is Mark Davis telling fans to smarten up regarding Josh McDaniels? Isn't the verdict in now? What else do we need to see to determine he's a better offensive coordinator than head coach? All he does as a head coach is lose. It still is early, but it kind of isn't. The problem with the Patriot way is at some point you got to win. At some point, you've got to bust through. That attitude, the relationship with players. Now, they're not as standoffish with the media as Bill Belichick was, but you can't avoid, at some level, being like Bill Belichick, and that's going to rub people the wrong way within your building. And if you're not winning, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. If you're winning, you can do whatever you want. I don't think Mark Davis likes buying out contracts, and he had to pay a lot of money to move on from John Gruden. It occurred to me when I was doing the power rankings, because I think I made this comment. We're just about 2 years to the day removed from John Gruden being forced out due to the surfacing of the emails he sent while he was working for ESPN, sent them to Bruce Allen, the former president of the Washington football team. Does Mark Davis wish he could bring John Gruden back? And would he bring him back if he could? I don't know. Bottom line is the Raiders have not been good for a very long time. And since Mark Davis inherited the team, they've been to the playoffs twice, I think, and they've yet to win a postseason game. Another one from Tom Marshall. Did Mrs. Florio secretly enjoy your COVID isolation? I haven't gotten many text messages pining for me to, be able to spend time with her and have dinner with her and be anywhere but my office. Where I've been since I tested positive on Thursday morning, here in my office. Right next door is a guest bedroom where I will often take my little afternoon nap because I sleep 5 hours at night and one during the day. So I've been here, I've been there, I've been in my studio for both PFT Live and for the Sunday NBC obligations, and I've been down to the barn a couple of times. And that's it. I haven't been down to the gym to work out. I haven't been down to the basement. I went down once last night to get ice because I think I'm I'm beyond the 5-day isolation, and I think I did test negative. But yeah, I think she kind of enjoyed it. And I know Macy enjoyed it because it means she gets to sleep with mommy. But what's been hard for me, this is the hardest part, because I put a mask on to go from room to room. I'll put a mask on to go up to the studio, put the mask on to come back down. The dog sees me and wants to interact with me. And I don't want to make the dog sick. I don't know about dogs and COVID. I'm just trying to avoid the dog. And the dog's looking at me like, what's wrong with you, asshole? So I know she's accurate. I know. Great judge of character. I know. All right. JC Carm, when Al Michaels leaves the Thursday Night Football booth, does that mean Kirk Herbstreit is gone too? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how long Al's going to stay. I don't know how long Herbstreit's going to stay. I'm going to watch the game no matter what. Aren't you going to watch the game no matter what? No matter who does the game? Thursday night football, Sunday night football, Monday night football. It could be the kids from South Park, which actually would not be, we might be onto something there. But but it doesn't matter. We're going to watch the games regardless. I think we get a little too twisted up in who's actually calling the games. It is nice to hear Al's voice. For those of us who've been following football for a long time, there's a comfort in that. Great voice. We've heard it for years. It's as comfortable as the spot on your couch. That thing you like to drink or eat when you're watching a game. Your rituals, your routines. So I'm glad Al's still doing it. But whatever's next, whoever they hire, we're going to watch it. We're going to watch it because we're there for the game. We're not there for the announcers. Another one from JC Carm. Who has more pressure to succeed, Zach Wilson or Justin Fields or Mac Jones? Will any of these three be on their current teams next year? Well, I think Zach Wilson will be as the backup to Aaron Rodgers because I think Aaron Rodgers is going to want him there. Aaron Rodgers has so much power over the Jets. So much power, especially now that he's busting his ass in rehab to try to come back and play this year. If he wants Zach Wilson there next year, he'll be there. I don't think Justin Fields will be with the Bears. I've seen some chatter of maybe a trade to the Falcons. That would make sense. That would make sense. Because it's not like the Bears are giving up their bread and butter. He's fun to watch, but they've won 3 games in the last 2 years with him and none this year. They're 3-18 with Justin Fields at quarterback. Mac Jones is going to be interesting. Look, if they change coaches in New England, they may change quarterbacks as well. And I did hear reliably, and I know that people like to dispute whatever we report if they can, but I did hear that there was an effort to dangle Mac Jones. Subtle but unmistakable effort. And maybe they wish they had. Because you either have it or you don't. And Mac doesn't have it. I mean, there are basic things he can do. And if you had a great team around him, he's not even to the Kirk Cousins level, though. He's going to come out and throw for, 450 yards and take every hit and just keep going. He's not even to that level. Is he a top 20 quarterback? I don't think so. The Patriots aren't good enough to win with a guy who isn't in the top 20. Sean, at official Big Sean. Why are people wanting the Eagles tush push? I hate that name. I just call it quarterback push. Why do they want that play banned? Is it because they have perfected it? I saw 4 or 5 other teams unsuccessfully try the play this week. If that's the case, ban pre-snap movement because Tyreek Hill is too fast. Look, here's the general process for how this all happened. There was a rule against pulling or pushing players. They never flagged the team for pushing a teammate with the ball, and it usually happened near the end of the play. Lineman comes running down, and shoves the pile. They never called it. So I think it was in 2006. I may have to go back and refresh my memory on this, but they went and they said, well, you know what? If we're never going to call this, let's just forget about the rule. And then 2022, the Eagles finally realized we can use this affirmatively in our planning. It just doesn't look good. It doesn't look like football. There's no artistry to it. It's just kind of an ugly clot of bodies. But here's the reality. If they made that play illegal, wouldn't the Eagles still be able to pull off the quarterback sneak whenever they wanted to? I mean, the Patriots used to be able to do it because Tom Brady was great at finding that crack and diving through it. So I don't think they need it. And you're right, other teams have tried it and it hasn't worked out. And you potentially get players injured, as the Giants did. 2 blockers, a tight end and a guard, I think, got injured when the Giants tried it unsuccessfully on Monday night. And the Chargers tried it unsuccessfully on Sunday, a week after Keenan Allen told me when they did a handoff on 4th and short, hey, we should do that quarterback push play. I thought of that. We should do that. We should. And then I guess they listened and they did it, and it didn't work. Amused to Death 44, NBC said they had 2 million new female viewers. How can they possibly know the gender of their viewers? I don't know how Nielsen does things. I don't know how they figure all that out. I really don't know, but they have a way to do it, and they have analytics and they have formulas and they can do the calculations. So I think that there is some merit to it, however they go about doing it. Another one from Amused to Death, and I like this one. I heard all players who suffered concussions this season, not one of them was able to play the next game. That wasn't always the case. Have they tightened up the protocols? They're never going to come out and say it. I think the Tua Tagovailoa stuff last year may have caused the NFL to become a little more cautious. There was a period of time, once the NFL had its concussion epiphany, October of 2009, 14 years ago, hauled up to Congress to talk about head injuries, head trauma, what the league and the union has done, what they failed to do. They changed the concussion protocol then and put into play this process where you have an unaffiliated neurotrauma consultant who makes the decision as to whether or not a player can be cleared to play. At first, it felt like the presumption was if you had a concussion, you would not play the following week. And then after a few years, the pendulum went the other way. And I think all the stuff with Tua last year caused the pendulum to swing back to if you're concussed, you're probably not going to get cleared in 1 week. So they're not going to come out and tell us that. They're not going to admit that they're influenced by those kinds of dynamics, but it sure feels like the pendulum, which started here, went here, is now back over here. And the thing to watch in the coming years, does it start to move back the other way, where the presumption becomes if you get a concussion, more likely than not, you'll be cleared by the following week. JC Carm, with his current level of play, what's the best possible outcome for Josh Dobbs after Kyler Murray comes back? I mean, it's going to be go sit on the bench, assuming Kyler Murray even plays this year. There is a very strong business reason for Kyler Murray not to play, but the Cardinals are better than I thought they were going to be because in the offseason, they weren't making decisions that prioritized winning this year, but they still are better than they were supposed to be. So we'll see what happens with Kyler Murray. There are significant guarantees for injury that will become fully guaranteed if he can't pass a physical by not long after the 2023 season ends. So Josh Dobbs goes to the bench. You need a backup in the event Kyler Murray gets injured again. They're not going to trade him. They're going to keep him. And he's the backup. And then maybe next year, I think he just did a 1-year contract. He could go somewhere else and compete to be a starter. JC Carm, why haven't the Vikings gotten a deal done with Justin Jefferson? It's as simple as the Vikings have a guarantee structure that doesn't fully guarantee multiple years now. It rolls every year. A lot of teams will do a guarantee that goes like this. Let's say you've got 2 years fully guaranteed right out of the gates. And then by March of year 2, the 3rd year becomes fully guaranteed. By March of year 3, the 4th year becomes fully guaranteed. It goes like that. The Vikings are in a small group of teams that won't do that except for quarterback. They did it for Kirk Cousins. And it's full guarantee this year, injury guarantee next year. Next year, the injury guarantee becomes fully guaranteed. The next year, the injury guarantee becomes fully guaranteed. It goes 1 year at a time. Justin Jefferson wants more and deserves more security than that. They've done it for Kirk Cousins. They didn't do it for Jefferson. I think at the end of the day, that's the main reason why a deal didn't get done. And now the question becomes, will a deal ever get done in Minnesota for Justin Jefferson, or will he be? And my theory was, if they don't get a deal done by the start of the season, after the season, he potentially becomes part of the package to allow the Vikings to move up for a Caleb Williams or a Drake May, somebody that will be a franchise quarterback. They've had great defensive linemen. They've had great defensive backs. They've had great receivers. They haven't had a great quarterback since Fran Tarkenton, and they haven't been back to the Super Bowl since Fran Tarkenton. Last one from JC Carm. Why does no one mention a contract extension for Tua? Well, because Tua and the Dolphins seem to have this understanding that they'll do it after the season. And we need to see what he does this season before we know whether or not he deserves an extension after the season. I think so much of it is premised on him staying healthy all year long. But at some point during this season, it becomes fair to say, hey, look, the guy was drafted the same year as Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, and he's playing better than both of them. He is right now, given that Joe Burrow is hobbling around on one leg. At some point, it becomes a little conspicuous. And Tua's not the kind of guy to come out and say anything about it. Maybe behind the scenes he will. But at some point, I think it's fair to ask. And I've kind of poked around at that a little bit. At what point do the Dolphins say, we're going to take care of Tua? We don't need him to be healthy all year long. We see that he's our guy. We see that he's our future. And we don't have to worry about our offensive coordinator going somewhere else as a head coach, because our offensive coordinator is our head coach. Watch Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is inching toward the same problem they had with Lovie Smith and Dirk Cutter back when Jameis Winston developed well in 2015. What did they do after 2015? They nudged Lovie Smith out and they gave the job to Dirk Cutter. Why? Because they were afraid they were going to lose Dirk Cutter and they were going to have to start over with another offensive coordinator. And now you got Dave Canales there. The offense is working. The Buccaneers are good. Baker Mayfield has rediscovered his mojo from 2018 and 2020. And Canales is going to potentially be a candidate to be a head coach elsewhere. And the Buccaneers are going to have to start all over again next year. I'm not saying they're going to have a repeat of what occurred in 2016. But, and this goes back to my other point, we know that McDaniel is going to be the head coach in Miami. So if it's working with him in Tua, why not keep it going? Why not pay Tua? Why not put an offer on the table? This is an opportunity for the Dolphins to put an offer on the table that Tua would likely take, and that will be far less than what he would get after the season. I'm glad you asked that question, JC Carm. Now I got a little post I can write, and I can put this video in there, so thank you very much. With that, we'll say, boy, this has been a long edition of PFT PM. I didn't plan to say that. I'll say we're done for today. We do this every Wednesday during the season, with the possibility of doing it on a Friday, depending upon how big of a deal the Thursday night game is. Is there some controversy, or is there some big news? Was there a big trade or something like that? But it is going to be every Wednesday through the season, unless I forget one of these days, which is always possible. Thanks, as always, for some of your time. Thursday morning, PFT Live, followed by the Joint Mega Picks podcast. Chris Sims will be back for both of those. Thanks again, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.